Welcome back, everybody. Most of the time when I was working at a camera store, and this has been a little bit over a decade, vintage lenses weren't very popular. And as a consequence, you could pick up some really great lenses really cheap. There were a few enthusiasts that were really into them, but they were not very common, so people that did want vintage lenses could come in and get some of the storied names in photography for a really cheap price. That same group, when they got online, started spreading the word, and slowly people started talking about it on YouTube, and the prices started to go up and up and up. Today, some of the brands like Leica and Zeiss and Contax, where you could get just really great deals on high quality optics, maybe a decade or so ago, are priced so high that I can't afford them, and a lot of videographers and photographers, it's just out of your price range. So recently, I've been thinking about trying to put together a lens set for photo and video. I'd like to do 3 lenses and have the cost be around $100 because that was very achievable back in the day. I ended up settling on 3 primes from the Canon FD mount lenses. I got the 20mm f2.8, the 50mm f1.8, and the 135mm 3.5. None of these are high-end lenses. There were higher-end lenses in all 3 of those focal lengths. These were designed originally to be budget lenses. The 50 was the nifty 50 or the thrifty 50 of its era. These have a little bit of character, but they're pretty sharp. They're fairly modern as vintage lenses go. As a matter of fact, if you're really looking for a vintage aesthetic, you may want to go for the SC version of all 3 of these because the coatings are a little bit older, and that might be a little bit more vintage looking if that's really what you're looking for. But I kind of like the balance that these gave. Looking at eBay right now, you can pick these up for about $35 each from a dealer with a really good rating and reputation. Of course, being eBay, you're going to have to pay shipping most likely on anything that you buy there, so it'll be a little bit higher than that. But straight purchase price, these are just a tiny bit over $100 if you go out to eBay. I do recommend looking locally. Generally, there's a repair shop here in town that can have some good deals on these kinds of lenses. There's a local dealer that if they haven't moved stuff in a while will often give me great deals. Flea markets, garage sales, those kinds of things. Sometimes they're frustrating because all you see is baby clothes and things that you're not interested in, but sometimes there's really great deals to be had. I did do a video on getting great deals on used equipment, and I will leave a link to that in the description below. And one other quick benefit to these 3 lenses is they all have a 52mm filter thread, so you can buy one ND filter and swap it back and forth between the lenses. And that saves you a little bit of money. So let's take a look at some of the footage that I got over this last weekend. There's a local state historical park that occasionally has reenactments, and I looked at the calendar and they were doing live demos this weekend. So I decided that would be a fun thing to go out and do a non-scripted bit of video with. And I brought 2 cameras with me. I brought one of my Micro Four Thirds cameras, so 2x crop sensor, and I brought a full frame camera with me as well. I thought that combination of cameras would give a little variety to the footage so you can see what individual lenses look like on different bodies. And a quick note, if you're not familiar with adapting optics, these do require an adapter. I got mine online for under $20 each because there's no electronics in the adapter. These are old lenses that don't have electronics contacts. And because of that, you may have to set your camera to shoot without a lens. It's usually a setting that's pretty easy to find in the menus. So the first footage we're going to look at here is of the 28mm lens on a full frame body. This is a great focal length from capturing anything from big sweeping vistas if you're farther back, getting a fairly large group if you can't back up. Super handy for those kinds of shots, and I was able to capture quite a few. Thanks to the 2.8 aperture, which certainly isn't as bright as some modern lenses, but it's still not bad. Opening all the way up to 2.8, I was able to shoot this scene inside of a blacksmith shop that was very dark. They keep the lights dark so they can see the color of the metal as they pull it out of the forge. And shooting at 2.8, I didn't even have to boost my ISO to get this shot. When we adapt this lens to a crop sensored camera, we get an equivalent focal length of about 42mm on the 1.5 crop APS-C bodies, up to about 56mm equivalent on a Micro Four Thirds body. So it falls, kind of brackets that normal range pretty well. That's a focal length that I think most photographers are pretty familiar with, and videographers as well. It's a pretty easy lens to walk around with and frame things. Switching to the 50-1.8, first on the full frame camera. If you've ever shot a nifty 50, you know what this field of view looks like. Obviously, this is a manual focus lens with manual aperture, so it's not quite as convenient maybe to some people as a modern lens, but the framing should be pretty familiar. 1.8 is a fairly bright aperture, so you can shoot in lower light or blur backgrounds if you want to. And for me, this is just a super easy lens to shoot with. It's really easy to walk up to something and kind of have a good idea before you even bring the camera up to your eye of what's going to be in and out of frame. And as a consequence, I got some great footage with it and really enjoyed shooting it. There was a lot going on, so sometimes this is, again, bigger scenes from farther away or tighter scenes from closer. And it was just a fun lens to shoot, and I'm really happy with the output that I got. Switching to my Micro Four Thirds body, this is more of like a portrait prime length. It ends up being a 100mm equivalent, which is pretty tight. And that allowed me to capture things, again, that I was too far back from and couldn't approach closely, or that I didn't have time to get to, or often there was some stuff going on just out of camera that I didn't want to capture, so it allowed me to eliminate those by shooting with a tighter framing. If you wanted to do a portrait, either photo or video, that combination is going to work really well. And if you have a dark enough neutral density or you're in dim enough lighting, you can open up that aperture and get a ton of background blur. Now, a 135mm lens isn't one that I use a ton when I'm shooting video. It's just really tight. Even on a full frame camera, and particularly on a crop sensor camera, it's a pretty tight frame. So if you're doing any kind of scripted work, generally you can be closer to the actors and don't need that kind of framing. But as we were beginning to look for things to capture with that lens, they started setting up a Canon, which occasionally they use to mark time of day. So we were approaching 2 o'clock and they wanted to fire the Canon there to mark that time for everybody. I was able to find a place to set up my Micro Four Thirds camera a ways back and put it in slow motion mode, capture 120 frames a second to get that cool fireball that happens when they light these cannons off. I grabbed a still from that footage, and you can see that this is a pretty good looking shot for a $35 lens. You can see the little tongue of flame shooting out where the fuse goes in back, and the column of flame shooting out the front. And being a little bit closer to that than I probably wanted to, I can tell you these are very, very loud and kind of fun if you get a chance to see them. And this lens did a great job. And I was able to capture some other scenes from a distance or tighter framing, like the other combinations that gave us medium telephotos, and I found it a lot of fun to shoot. Overall, I'm really happy with these lenses. This 3-lens set on a full frame body gives you pretty much everything you need for most scripted work. You've got a telephoto, you've got a normal, and you've got a wide. On a Micro Four Thirds system, I would suggest probably if you need a wide angle lens, investing in a more modern manual wide for that. There's a lot of lenses out for APS-C and Micro Four Thirds, particularly inexpensive video lenses that'll get that job done. I've got a 12mm, I believe it's a Rokinon, that matches up with these pretty well. In those situations where I can't back up, I think having that wide angle lens makes this a full set. If you found a vintage lens that can still be had at a reasonable price, please let us know in the comments below. I think everybody likes getting a great deal, and I know I'm interested, and I imagine anybody that's still watching this video would be interested to see that as well. And of course, if you have any questions, please leave those as well. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. Please like and subscribe. Good luck on your art journey, and we'll see you next time.